I kind of think that it's gonna get a lot worse really fast for some reason. I'm kind of a doomer, I guess. But you started out by talking about the Russians nuking us, and I do think maybe they have a first strike philosophy.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose Prado, Man-Made Survival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel watching this video. Today we have a special treat for you. We have Jefferson here on the podcast, and we're going to be discussing the things that we're seeing right now on the news with, food inflation getting out of hand, with the farmers in California having a difficult time because of the water shortages and a bunch of other things. So this is going to be me asking him, the questions that he could answer as a professional, but also he's going to be sharing what he feels is necessary for you to listen to. So I want to welcome Jefferson to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey, Jose, thanks for having me. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time.
No, I appreciate that.
I first heard you on Spreaker. Are you still on Spreaker?
Yeah, I'm still there. That's the main platform that distributes to all the other podcast platforms.
Interesting. Yeah, I found you there, and then I was making some comments. I don't know, was that 3 years ago or something? I don't know when you started doing this.
Yeah, about a year and a half now.
Cool. Yeah, so, and then I stopped listening to podcasts on my cell phone, and I found you on YouTube. And so I download your YouTube videos as MP3. And,
okay, cool.
Yeah, I've been listening on this little device here.
And it comes very handy.
Yeah,
right?
really. Yeah. Yeah, I don't like carrying the phone around all the time. I think I don't want to be tracked. If someone with a drone could just kill me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you don't use it, and you have your MP3 player, especially since you're out there farming all the time. Your cell phone would get dirty, and I'm sure it would create a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So having that is a lot easier.
Yeah, I listen to stuff all the time, and yours is one of my favorite things to listen to. And you said your dad was in the hospital, so you had kind of like a gap where you didn't post anything, and then so
what had happened is that my dad had gotten sick. It was over a weekend, and it was March 27th, and he just suddenly just felt ill. He didn't understand what was happening, but he just felt kind of like down, like tired, and the thing that made us call the ambulance and take him to the hospital is that he suddenly just couldn't walk anymore. He wasn't all the way there in his mind. He was starting to just look very confused. So it kind of freaked me out. And since my dad is a transplant patient, we knew that infections are very easy for him. So we took him to the ER, and from there they did the assessment, and they found out they had an infection in his blood. So since he has a transplant, we had to go to Tennessee, and I live in Alabama. So, I had to stay up there and be with him in the room the entire time. So that's the reason why I didn't post anything for almost 2 months. And now we're back home. Thank God that they were able to find what was wrong with him, although it took them a very long time. And this is one of the things that I really, there's people in the, I guess you can see in the alternative media and others who really don't like the medical system or the establishment. But, in my experience, they have saved the lives of my family multiple times. And my dad was, the latest. And with all the instruments that they have and the tests that they can do and, do blood cultures and everything like that, and they couldn't find what was wrong with them until they finally said, we're going to send you home with this medicine, which was the IV, and they did it through a PICC line on his vein over here. And they said, instead of you staying here, you can go home and do the same treatment. We'll just send you the medicine. And then they finally called us on the phone and found out that he had a fungus in his transplant, and now they're treating it. So he still has that fungus in his kidney, but he has a 3-month treatment he has to go through. So that's the reason why I had to, step away from the podcast and everything for 2 months.
That's so crazy. Uh, yeah, I broke my leg a few years ago, really bad, and yeah, without the modern medical establishment, I would probably be limping. My foot was like off 45 degrees, and
Oh
I've
wow.
got like 2 plates and 15 screws.
Mm.
I was roller skating, but yeah, it just goes to show you that we prepare for shit hitting the fan. Like EMP, nuclear war, all this stuff. But really, probably what's going to happen is that you have a personal medical emergency that just keeps you from working, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
that
instead
really
of
is what sucks. And it's a great thing that, you know, that even if it's really expensive and the medicine that might keep you in it forever, whatever the case may be, but if it really wasn't for the intervention of the doctors and nurses and everything, I really do think that our standard of living here in the United States would be a lot worse. And yet, can things be worked on so it's not so expensive? Sure, but dismissing it altogether, I don't think is something that we should be doing. And if we're talking about a real crap has hit the fan scenario where we actually live in a post-apocalyptic world, let's just say whatever. Maybe it was an EMP which could take us there, or it might have been an asteroid or whatever. The I really do think that people are gonna die more often from a simple infection or something like happened to you or something that happened to my dad than from people actually being out there trying to just kill everybody because they're trying to get their stuff. So I really do think that there should be something that we should be studying, because if we don't have doctors in our team, in our group, then we're gonna be at the mercy of nature, of God, of just of whatever it is that is wrong with us. So we have to make sure that we learn that as well.
yeah, it could get really bad if we don't have modern society. I just went to the store and bought like 130 bucks of groceries. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and
even farming, without.
go ahead.
I was just saying, even without that stuff, even though I'm a farmer, I would suffer a lot, without the grocery store.
One of the things that was happening while I was in the hospital is this, altercation, I guess, with Russia because of Ukraine, and it really put me in a
Yeah,
position where I was away from home, you know, to like 300 miles away, I think, from where I live, something like that, 200 miles. Anyways, um, and I was thinking if let's say we did go to war because we were sending troops over there, or well, not troops, but Humvees and equipment and stuff like that, and it kind of looked like war could actually break out. But it made me think. Let's go beyond that. That let's say it did actually happen, and some cities were nuked, and where I was, it was Nashville, Tennessee, in the Vanderbilt hospital. And I was wondering if there was to be a nuke, there in the city, in Nashville, or another one, because Nashville is a big city, it's an important city for the United States. Would I have to leave my dad behind to come back home and take care of my kids and my family and the alliance and everybody, or would I try
wow.
to get him home somehow? Because that was when he was in the middle of the infection, when it was a raging infection. The doctors didn't even know how to treat it, and they were doing all these antibiotics. Then that would have been a very hard decision for me to take. And I was thinking about that, and I was wondering, what am I going to do? And the very sadly, we're going to be put in those type of positions when you're going to have to make a call. And for me, when I was thinking about it, I made up my mind, and it was like, well, my dad has this infection, and without the medicine, he's going to die, right? So I would
Yeah,
have to leave him behind to come back home and make sure that my kids are doing good, my family, everybody else in my land. So you have to think about those type of scenarios when if you're going to be away from home, if something like this, like it happened to my dad, happens to you. So those are the real things that we have to consider when we're thinking about preparing. It's not just fantasies or anything like that, but actual things that we have to think about. And this gardening thing that we're going to be discussing today is one of those things, because you just mentioned something that even though you're a farmer, without the grocery stores, you would actually be suffering. So my question to you is, what what are the things that you think you're missing that you had to go to the grocery store that you had to get that if you didn't have it, it would give you a harder time at home?
Coffee, uh, coffee and dairy products. We don't have a cow. I think that, I mean, it would be such a luxury if you were in a survival situation to have a milk cow, where I don't really have the skills or the fencing required, but I think having dairy products, I would really miss them. And oil, like cooking oils, would be hard to get. And I think with a cow, you could use the butter, or if you had pigs, you could use lard, for to substitute for cooking oils. Um, but yeah, I grow vegetables, so I've got like potatoes, cabbages, beets. I could survive, but it would be. I mean, maybe the diet would be actually better for my health.
Yeah.
To be
Yeah, that's what a lot of people
uh,
suspect the same thing. And the way that we eat now, with everything that's at the grocery store, most of it is junk. And we're all I guess you can say we're all guilty of it because we have been used to it and we have been drinking, eating, and everything else for a very long time. Most of us since we've been children, so it's the only thing we know. And with the science has been advancing and everything else, now we're getting the nutritional value of the actual food we're eating and everything else, so we can make better choices now than we used to back in the past. But um but one of the things that I've been thinking, because I get a lot of time to think when I'm doing the podcast and all the things that I'm researching, and I really do think that we have to start a new movement in the prepper community, which is something that I want to do. And really, I know it's gonna sound weird because when I'm thinking about it, it's like, well, I mean, it sounds weird, but it makes sense, at least in my head. But what we really need to do as far as preparedness is we need to get the survival out of preparedness. And what I mean by that is that instead of us thinking, what is the thing that I can do to get me just by, just to survive? What are the steps that we can take to make, our home, um, you know, more adequate as possible, to where instead of just surviving, we're actually living from the land and everything that we may get. And even if there are things that we are lacking, we will have the surplus of goods that we have created in our own property that is going to enable us to be able to find dairy or find coffee or stuff like that we may not have the space or maybe even the climate to do it in our own property. What do you think?
yeah. I was just thinking about the word called thrival. I've heard that instead of survival, you're thriving. That would be the ultimate, where you have your homestead and it's its own ecosystem, and
Hmm.
yeah, where your group can survive. And I think it's like I'm thinking like Noah's Ark. It's like all the cities are collapsing, but you've got this rural property with your family, and you're all working together to survive. I mean, that seems like the ideal.
Yeah, and do you think it would be possible to make those steps to where, all right, let's say that you have, um if I'm not mistaken, you have 5 to 10 acres, right, of farmland?
Yeah, 15, but
Of
we
15.
we farm about of it. Yeah.
So if you had, let's say, money was not an issue, right?
Yeah.
If you could turn your house into a self-sustained system, how difficult would it be for you? Since you already have the farming down, since you do it every day.
I think without petroleum, do I have diesel fuel? I need diesel and electricity. So I need the diesel for my tractor and then electricity for pumping water. And I don't really, I assume that you're talking about a scenario where those things wouldn't be available.
Well, let's say they
True.
were available, but you were trying your best to make your homestead as self-sustained as possible, without needing the extra help from the electricity or from the diesel, because I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I would say that if you had enough people helping you in the farm, you wouldn't need the tractors as you probably do
Yeah.
right now.
Yes, it was mainly the tractor is for preparing the ground. I till
Mm-hmm.
and mowing and stuff, and you could use pigs for tilling. If you could fence off an area and have some pigs in there, they would work. I don't know if you've ever seen pigs do that. Where they work up the soil.
No, I've never
Have
seen
you
it.
seen that?
No.
Yeah, if you can find pigs in an area, they'll totally till it. It looks like it's been tilled. They like to root with their noses,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, you could have pigs in an area and then maybe move chickens in after that, and they would scratch it flat,
Mm-hmm.
from their scratching, and then you could, even if you didn't have pigs, you could do it with a shovel, prepare the ground and a rake. I
It
think
would be a
having
lot
good
more difficult,
shovels
though,
is
for
important.
sure.
Oh yeah, it would be, and the scale would have to be a lot smaller, and
Okay.
so yeah, I have this fantasy survival garden that I don't really have it because we do row cropping. Our rows are 200 feet long,
Okay.
but my fantasy survival is 4 squares, and I sent you a picture of it, or I will.
Yeah.
And in the 4 squares, there's like you divide them up into greens, fruits, roots, and then chickens. And so for a whole year, your chickens would be in this field, small field, and then you would grow greens, and then fruits in here, and then roots in here. By fruits, I'm talking about like tomatoes and peppers, cucumbers, anything that comes from a flower,
Okay.
like yeah, and so then you could have a compost pile in the chicken area, and then you could also feed the chickens. Chickens will survive free range. You might have to let them out if they're not surviving, to get to your whole property to eat bugs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But having their base at that one in this one area, and then you start building a compost pile, and they, and feeding them. Say if you in your greens area, if you had a bunch of cabbages growing, and you were done harvesting them, still there's leaves and stuff, and you could feed them to the chickens, and any debris you can make a compost pile. And then anyway, the point is that in the next year you would rotate everything, and so the chickens would come over where the greens were, and then the greens would be where the fruits, and then the fruits would be where the roots were, and then the roots would be where the chickens were. I have this
Right.
whole like crazy. I think I showed it to you in my last podcast where I made this. Maybe someone could take a screenshot of that and study it, but anyway, it's kind of hard to explain quickly. But anyway, I do have a fantasy survival garden that, yeah,
Do you
that's kind
think?
of an
Do
overview.
you think? Okay, so now that you mentioned that, you know, as food prices go up, let me read to you a headline that I have here from the most important news.com. And the headline says the United Nations is sounding the alarm about the dramatic increases in global food prices. So I really do think that the food prices are going to get to a certain point where people are going to be forced into looking somewhere else about, where they're going to get their food. And I really do think that some people are going to be tempted to just start a garden out of nowhere, right? Even though they have
Yeah,
never tried it before, or they don't have the ground ready or anything like that. And the reason that I feel confident that people are going to do that is because, survival forums are talking about that right now, where people have the seeds, but they've never even opened it, and they don't even have a space available for those seeds. So they haven't gone,
yeah.
to the point where they're actually practicing it every day or every year, just to make sure that they do have these skills, for them to be able to grow what they're planning on growing. So do you think that this 4-part garden that you're talking about, you think that's going to be something simple for people to just adapt, or, to do when push come to shove?
I was thinking about some of the problems that people would have if you're just first trying to start a garden. And when we rented. This was the third place that we rented for farming, and we were finally able to buy this place. But when we first got here, we had been kind of spoiled because the other places we had been were already in vegetable production, and we had just rented them. And when we got here, we planted stuff and it wouldn't grow, and we were like, "What's going on? This stuff doesn't grow here." Like our cauliflower would be like this small, and the cauliflower would be really bitter, and it was like, I don't know what's going on. We're doing the same thing, and we didn't know. At our previous place, people had been adding manure to the soil and also lime. Anyway, we did a soil test here, and we found that our pH was 5.5, which is really acidic. 7 is neutral, and so it ended up that we had to spread a bunch of lime. We actually spread 4 tons of lime per acre here,
Oh, wow.
and in like 2012 when we did that. But now, ever since we did that, the pH has been fine. It's been close to 7, which is what you want, near 7. 7 is neutral pH, and a little below 7 is good. But anyway, the soil was just too acidic, and depending on like your soil type, that could be a huge problem. You would plant stuff and it wouldn't grow. And I've heard people, we were giving tomato plants to our customers last week, and I heard someone say, "Well, I can't grow tomatoes. They always die on me." And I asked them what they did, and she said, "I don't know. We got the potting soil and put them in there, and a lot of people, and then they died." And I think there weren't any nutrients in the potting soil that she got. A lot of people around here it's called mushroom compost, and they'll buy it's stuff that mushrooms have grown in, and then the mushroom growers will sell it as compost, and it doesn't have any nutrients. It's basically it's just basically
Useless dirt.
dead. Yeah, and so people don't often realize that you need fertilizer, and that's what chickens are good for. They help with their poop to fertilize the ground, and so that's why I was suggesting in that ideal garden, where you'd have chickens involved, and get it's nitrogen basically is what they have in their poop,
Yeah.
and you really need nitrogen. We purchase like to our farm like probably 18 tons of chicken manure here a year, and so this little pamphlet I printed offline. It's called "Help for the Hard Times" by George Washington Carver, and it was in around 1916, I think, that this was written. And a lot of people were hungry, and George Washington Carver was at that Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Have you heard of him?
I had not heard of him until you had sent me the link.
Yeah, anyway, so he was suggesting for people to make gardens, back then. And so I'm just going to read a paragraph here. He says,
Yeah,
"Begin now by hauling leaves, rich earth from the woods, and muck from the rich swamps." So basically, you're getting like dirt from the woods and the swamps. You're trying to increase the fertility of your garden area, by adding stuff to it.
Right.
It says, "Spread this on the ground at least 6 inches deep. Spade or turn under with a plow to a depth of 8 or 9 inches." So I think back then, people were pulling plows with mules or horses, So I think you'd have to get that stuff onto your place and use a shovel and try to make your soil rich.
Yeah.
And then it says, but then it says, let's see. After you turn it in, then spread another layer of rich earth, leaves, etc. in the same way. Except to every 2 loads of leaves, muck, etc., mix 1 of barnyard manure. Plow again just deep enough to cover the manure up well, and then rake thoroughly and begin planting. So he was also suggesting that you use manure. And back on farms back then, had basically everyone had animals on their farm, but now, like I have a handful of ducks here,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a vegetable farm, and the dairy farm is like down the road. That's where all the manure is, but it's basically toxic because they have so many animals there. It's actually, it's kind of off topic, but dairy manure can have herbicides in it that pass through the cow. There's some really strong herbicides they use now that it makes the manure. I can't use it. It would just kill my plants. So anyway,
how do the cows get that? What you call it? You just said it.
the herbicide.
Yeah, herbicide. Thank you.
Yeah, there's some sort of, I don't know the names of them. We're certified organic here. We don't use any herbicide. I definitely realize why people do, because we have a really bad weed problem here. But yeah, there's some sort of herbicides that it's on the hay that the
So it's on
cows
their
eat,
feed.
and then it's on the feed, and then it'll go through their system and in their poop, and then if you try to grow tomatoes or something in that manure, then it'll kill the tomatoes still because it's still an herbicide. So
Okay.
I don't know if that's everywhere. I had just heard about that, and so we don't use. We try to be careful where we get our compost. We do purchase compost also, but it doesn't have that stuff in it. Anyway, I don't know where I was going, but I was just trying to say that after World War II, things began to specialize. Like a dairy farmer was a dairy farmer. He didn't also have like a field of cabbages,
Mm-hmm.
where he could take his work and spread it on that field and then grow cabbages there. There's kind of like everything got more separated.
Yeah. And now that you mentioned that, I have actually thought about that issue with the cattle farmers, or I mean ranchers, excuse me, where they're talking about that the cost of feed has gone through the roof, right? And it's more expensive for them to feed their cattle. But then wouldn't there be, or actually the solution to that, wouldn't it be for the ranchers to grow their own feed in their own, they already tend to have a lot of land, so let's say they have 20-30 acres worth of the space for their cows. I would say, or I would think, correct me if I'm wrong, where they could take 10 acres of that land and just grow whatever it is that they're feeding their cattle, and that would actually be cost productive. At least that's what I would think, because that's the goal that we're trying to do here, or for preppers, to where you grow the food that you're gonna feed yourself and you're gonna be feeding your livestock. So do you think that would be an actual solution for those cattle ranchers, or what would be another solution for them?
I have seen a dairy down the road from here, and they do have a big cornfields, and I've seen them spraying the manure on those fields and then growing corn in there. But for a survival garden, I mean, anyway, you need manure or you need nutrients,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think that some cattle ranchers probably do that, but probably not most of them.
Yeah, that'd be
People who
commercial
need
ones.
hay. Yeah, I don't know, because you need hay over the winter, and I think probably a lot of them do some haying, but it might be more efficient to just purchase it. But until the system breaks down.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Right. Yes.
So take us to the steps. Let's just say that today was the apocalypse, right? Today is an EMP hit, whatever it is that you're preparing for today, and people were saying, all right, we have to get this garden down. Right now is summertime in the U.S. What would be the steps that you would tell, let's say, your neighbor who is not a prepper, who doesn't have a farm, who has a corporate job, and they just suddenly got fired, or they can no longer go to work, whatever the case may be, and he's like, hey, I need your help. Tell me what are the steps that I need to take for me to grow my own garden. What would be those steps?
Okay, so you would find the garden space, and then you wouldn't be able to do a soil test at that point.
Right.
So I guess that you would be at this level where the guy's talking about trying to gather stuff all around and make it like a more nutritious spot, with all the leaves like that. But you wouldn't be able to. I think it would take a while for that stuff to break down. So I guess that you just want to work up some ground, and I would say you would spread some fertilizer of some sort, and we needed to spread lime here, to make our pH more correctly. And then growing starts. I think it's going to be almost impossible for a person who isn't gardening already
Mm-hmm.
to, in a survival situation. It's going to be very difficult because the learning curve is so hard,
Yes.
But yeah, because you also need water. You'd have to think about how to get water to the vegetables, and if you kind of get rain frequently there, maybe. I mean, you would have to depend on the rain or having buckets to bring, from a stream to your plants.
So
That
it would
would be a
suddenly
way.
become very labor intensive overnight.
Yeah.
So
And
okay. So one of the things that I teach here, as you well know, is that you need at least 2 years worth of food stocked up at home, because you want to give yourself at least 2 opportunities to do it during 2 growing cycles to be able to grow something. And because you hear a lot of opinions and a lot of chatter out there that says that you only need a month worth of food at home, because they think that the system will still work, right? And what we're seeing right now is that by this time next year, it may be very, very difficult because of the farmers in California not being able to plant anything. But if this hypothetical person, that who's a corporate person who suddenly find themselves in the apocalypse, if they had the opportunity to, let's say right now is June, right? They would have until, let's say, next spring, which I don't know what time spring is where you live, but where I live is around March, March, April, and maybe even May, where that would give you the window of opportunity to put something on the ground and see if it grows. So do you think that the thing that I've been saying, more famously, is that you need to have those 2 years worth of food so you can give yourself those 2 growing cycles, and then this person will have, from now until March to make something work, or at least add stuff to the soil to where it's going to start to break down and make it ready for next planting season.
Yeah, we also here we plant a lot of stuff in like July and August, and then it overwinters. I think it might be too hot in Alabama to plant stuff in August. I don't know if vegetables are happy there in August, but you can plant stuff in the late. And then, like, I have a couple of examples of things that we planted in the late summer and then have grown. Let me grab something here.
All right.
So this cabbage here was grown last year, and it kind of looks rough, a little bit rough, but I harvested it probably in April, and it's just been in storage. It has a little spot here, but still, I've been saving it for this moment. This is so yeah, this cabbage is really old, but it still is a good cabbage. I mean, there's a bad spot right there.
But you just cut it off, right?
So yeah, but I think you would want to grow like storage things that store for a long time, Yeah. So cabbage is a good one, and potatoes. All these potatoes were grown last year. They're still edible, and I have pretty good storage for them.
When last year? What month?
Oh, so this is June. We've already planted our potatoes for this year, and so I probably planted these April. Probably, I think we planted them in March. These were planted in March of last year and harvested in like September, October, and then they're still good. So this looks kind of rough, but it's So cabbage and potatoes are good to grow. And
So do you keep them in a cool, dry place, or can they be out in the counter and still be really good for all those months?
we have like a walk-in cooler, so we have ideal conditions. It's about 38 degrees in there, and it's dark. And so I think if you would need some sort of root cellar or um, some way to keep things cool, at least like 50 degrees. I don't know if you can dig down under your house or something,
Yeah,
you
and that's
know.
one of the things that I've been thinking that people are. That's like the second thing that people are gonna figure out that they're gonna need. They're gonna need a way to preserve their food, because if we're in a scenario where even if the lights go out, let's say it's not an EMP where everything's destroyed, but we have some type of cyber attack, and even if you're able to get a generator where it's gonna be running, and running your refrigerator, if you run out of it, one of the first things that people are going to notice is they're going to have to cook everything that's in the freezer or in the refrigerator, because it's going to go bad, and they're going to have a way to preserve it. And we have actually lost that ability, because refrigerators were not around for thousands of years, and people were still able to store food properly to where they were able to eat it without starving.
I have a hole that I've been digging slowly. I haven't worked on it in a long time, but I can go down in there, and it's very cool. It's like 50 degrees. It'll be like in the 90s here, and I can go down there and it'll be 50 degrees. So I
Yeah.
think some sort of like
So how deep do
around.
you think people
So
would have to dig a root cellar for it to be cool enough to preserve their vegetables and maybe even meat?
yeah, I don't know. My hole, I can stand up in my hole, and then it's a little bit deeper than that. So
Yeah.
I wonder. Yeah, it's
Yeah, the literature that I have read on that is that it has to be more than a foot. After a foot of dirt, everything stays pretty much 55 degrees.
I have heard of people storing cabbages by digging, kind of like a trench, and then putting the cabbages in there and putting a bunch of dirt and straw and stuff over the top of it to insulate it. So that might be work for potatoes too. You kind of have to dig in there to get your food.
Yeah.
But
Well, I
yeah,
mean, if that's the only thing you have left, then, or there's going to be something desperate that people are going to be doing, then they're going to think it's silly, but necessary.
this is a beet I grew last year, and it's still fine. These beets, I can make some borscht. uh, Growing onions is good. These were grown last year, and they're still decent. But I have new onions already this year, so I don't really need my storage onions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it would totally be a brand new way of looking at life if crap was to hit the fan and suddenly people figure out that they're going to have to grow their own stuff. Or let's just say that we're in a high inflated environment where, it's not hyperinflation yet, but things at the grocery stores are very, very expensive. And right now we're at a point where the U.S. government is broke, right? We're borrowing all this money. We're dishing it all out. And it's going to eventually get to the point where the U.S. government is going to have to make the decision of what programs they're going to have to cut. And one of the very first programs they're going to cut is the help that they give to the people, because they're going to cut everybody off before they even, start looking at the possibility of them not getting paid. And they're not going to let that happen. So they're going to cut everybody off first. And I really do think that as more people pile up on the what we call it, the social safety net, is going to snap and people are going to fall right through it.
Yeah, we keep printing all this money and expecting nothing to happen, But I think we're going to end up like Venezuela. Yeah.
Yeah, I really
it's like
think
you're
it's
creating something.
Go ahead.
They're creating something out of nothing, and in my opinion, it's like black magic. You're trying to turn lead into gold or something.
Yeah.
And it's gonna backfire. And people, I don't know. I don't think people are ready. It's gonna be very difficult. I think people will be cannibals. They will just be hunting each other.
I really do
I don't
think that
know.
if things accelerate faster than people can keep up with, I think they might resort to cannibalism, because let's just go back to what happened in February in Texas when the grid went, almost completely down and destroyed. There were stories, and I reported on them on this podcast, that people were going to the grocery store just for casual grocery shopping, just to pretty much have fun with the cold weather. And when they got there, not only did they find long lines, once they got inside, there was nothing in there. And, there was a
Wow.
big possibility that the 18-wheelers were never going to be able to actually deliver any food because, the roads are frozen.
Yeah.
So that really showed, how quickly things can go crazy, especially people losing their mind with these gas shortages that we saw, just a couple weeks ago. I really do think that the
And
reason,
then you
go ahead.
but the meat hacking thing, where
Mhm.
they shut down a meat processing plant.
Yeah, and all
You
that.
heard
And I
about
really do
that?
think that the reason that people were trying to get gasoline in excuse me, in plastic bags and, storage totes and everything like that is because they do not understand preparedness. And I really do think that we're coming at a point where, even though preppers are mocked and everything like that, they're gonna have some sort of respect, or at least some type of footing in the society, and that's where we're going to take the advantage, and we're going to be able to spread, you know knowledge about preparedness and how it is practical. It's not just craziness, because once the entire system falls apart, or at least it falls for a little bit, where people start to freak out, if everybody was prepared, or at least the majority of the population, then we would not see these drastic measures, or at least people panicking to that extent.
Yeah, so I definitely think people, if you're not gardening this year, you should go ahead and try to start one. It's not too late,
Right.
and yeah,
and
because
and
there's a
learning
lot to learn.
learning to have chickens, that has a learning curve. Also, learning to have ducks, that's a learning curve. Learning to have rabbits and cattle and sheep and goats and everything else, you do have to do it for a while before you know what you're doing, because otherwise, if you get chickens out of, all of a sudden, in a collapse scenario, more than likely most of those chickens are going to die, and you're going to find yourself in a very hard spot.
I like chickens. I don't have any right now, but I have ducks because, well, it's a long excuse, but I think the chickens are the ultimate. They can
Uh,
survive pretty well without much food if you let them, free range.
Yeah, that's what I do with my chickens. They free range, and I
Yeah.
have a big metal container, um, where I store their corn, but I only feed them the corn a little bit at a time, because they're already out there ranging for bugs and everything else. So sometimes they even look at the corn, they don't eat it, because they'd rather go out there and find something that they can scratch out of the ground.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we grow this corn here. I have it. It's it's called flint corn, and it's really good to grow because you can make cornmeal and also polenta, which is grits, out of it, and that's
What's
a
it
good
called
one.
again?
It's it's a flint corn. Here's an example. So it's hard corn, you know, and in Mexico, I think they grow a lot of corn like this because they like masa. Wonder
Mhm.
what corn they make that like
Yeah,
tamales out of.
yeah.
I
I'm
wonder.
not
But
sure what.
anyway,
Go ahead.
go ahead. You're not sure what.
No, I was gonna say I'm not 100% sure what's the corn that they use, but I have seen the darker color ones that they plant over there.
So out of this corn, you can get this corn flour like this, and then also the same. This is like um, grits, basically. It's called polenta. It's basically the hard part. So you could feed your chickens this for sure. Yeah. So yeah, the Native Americans, they had corn, beans, and squash, and dry beans would be good to grow. Also, when they get You can it takes some processing, but like here's some dry beans.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Black beans, pinto
a
beans.
lot of
And you know that stuff was stored for a very long time, right? If you store it properly.
this stuff. Oh yeah, this will store for a long time. Yeah, this
Yep.
for years. Even if like as this would store for probably 10 years, and you
Leave
could
it in on
still
the
eat
calm.
it. Yeah. So this this is how we get the. We have this like antique. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, where the
But
yeah.
yeah, so we put the cob in here and spin this, and then that's how we get it off. Like it takes it off the cob.
What is
It's
that
kind of hard
called?
to show here. So this is, I'm not sure exactly what it's called. It's called a Little Giant, but basically it has teeth. And I found it at an antique store and mounted it to this box. If you grow corn like this, getting something like this would be really helpful to get it off the cob.
Yes, definitely. And then you would need another one to make it into the meal, right?
Yeah, and then you need a grinder.
Grinder.
And we have a stone grinder that, it's got two stones that rub together, and it's electric, but it also has a hand option. And then once you grind it, then you sift it, and then you get the flour and then the polenta. So it's quite a process, but learning how to do stuff like that goes a long way. If you need to feed your chickens
Or your family, yeah.
Yeah, you can make cornbread and stuff with that. And the polenta is really good. You're in Alabama, you probably eat grits.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of grits, but I have tasted them, once or twice.
Yeah.
I like oatmeal better.
Yeah. So there's this book here, Small Scale Grain Raising by Gene Logston. And it talks about growing oats on a small scale and growing wheat. It's like basically you grow your own pancakes,
Yeah, and
you
actually,
can grow wheat on.
You go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that actually this year I'm gonna experiment on growing my own wheat. I've actually have bought the seed,
Fun.
and I have prepared the ground,
Nice.
and I really do think that this year I'm gonna be experimenting on growing it. I know there's a disease that I can't really remember right now where if it gets hold of the grain, then it's done. It's not good anymore. So that's the reason why I want to experiment, because I want to make sure that I know how to grow grains without having that issue. And if I do have that issue, what would be the best way to get rid of it and still save my crop?
And that'll be nice. With have the straw from that, for your chicken coop.
Yes.
That'll be cool. Do you have some sort of way to harvest, like a scythe or?
No, I haven't gotten it yet, but I was looking at those things, the best way to do it. I mean, right now I just got the seed and actually have it in the box, but I don't know where the box is. But yeah, I think you plant it in the fall, and it grows through the winter, and then you harvest it in the spring, right?
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm gonna be doing.
That's cool. I just grow like for here we call it cover cropping. We'll grow some vegetables, and then in the winter before winter I'll plant some like oats and clover and stuff like that, and then it'll mature. I mean, then I'll just basically mow it the next year and then work it into the ground to like help fertilize the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have played around a little bit with growing or harvesting some wheat. That's fun. Huh. And then you have to.
Yeah,
that'll be neat.
All this stuff has to be learned. You cannot just do it out of a whim. You have to be doing it already. At least have some experience with it, because if right now if people are going to be pushed into growing their own vegetables, their own everything, then they're gonna have to go ahead and have the skills for it, so they're not suffering later on. And that's really the message that I want to, get out there, that you have to go ahead and get this stuff done before crap hits the fan, and then you're scrambling and trying to figure out how to do all these things while you still have the grid in
Yeah.
place that is going to be your safety net. Because if your vegetable garden fails, or if my experiment with the wheat fails, that doesn't mean that I've stopped eating and I can just go to the grocery store and get more, you know flour or whatever. But what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to learn all these skills, that way when we actually do need it, me and my alliance is going to have everything that they're going to need when the time comes. And um, in the next podcast, I already recorded 2 podcasts, before we did this interview. So I'm in the process of editing them. And on the third podcast, what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be actually comparing and contrasting the way that poor people live all throughout the world as compared
Neat.
to the United States, and what they eat, how they come up with that food, how much do they starve, because we have starving people all over the world, and what are the reasons that they do that. And I have been thinking that really right now people have to take the advantage that the grid is still here, that the United States is still rich, it's still the most powerful country in the world. And I really do think that preparedness would be, at least if not the answer, one of the solutions that's going to really help poverty, not only the United States but all throughout the world. Because if we bring those principles where the garden and having the fertile land, and having the surface water running year round, and everything else that I teach in this podcast, then I really do think that people can position themselves, the ones that want to listen, and have a better life that way, in other countries, and especially here in the United States, if things do get very, very bad.
You suggest that people get out of the cities and into a rural space.
Yes.
I agree. I think that cities might not be very friendly
No. And that
without.
and really and that's one of the things that I've actually learned from being from Mexico, because Mexico has a lot of land, and it has, it pretty much looks like the United States, as far as the land goes. You have beaches, you have mountains, you have valleys, you have all this stuff, but people are concentrated in the city. And and I really do think that if people were to branch out and go into the country, and follow the principles of preparedness, they would have a better life than they already do there. And not counting the cartels and everything like that. But what I'm saying is that if those principles of preparedness are taught, to people here in the United States and people in other countries, we can at least have some type of fight against poverty, because we're going back to growing our own stuff. And even even if people cannot afford to buy the brand new stuff, or vehicles or anything like that, at least they're going to have a good life where they're not hungry. And they can actually have more ideas that come out of preparedness, or that they can work on, because they're not worried about what they're going to eat the next day.
Yeah, people think maybe like a country peasant isn't very well off, but they might be a lot better off than someone in the city who's poor.
Yes, and homeless and everything like that. So um how do you see the country in the next 5 to 10 years with everything that's going on right now? I'm not suggesting that the crap is going to hit the fan, tomorrow or anything like that. But we do have to prepare as if it is. It might be another 10, 15, 20, 30 years, but eventually it's going to happen. So how do you see, or where do you see the country in the next 5 to 10 years?
I kind of think that it's going to get a lot worse really fast for some reason. I'm kind of a doomer, I guess. But you started out by talking about the Russians nuking us. And I do think maybe they have a first strike philosophy where they would strike first,
Yeah.
or even China. So I'm not very confident that things are gonna. I do think it will probably collapse, like at least like the Soviet style collapse of the 1990s, where we have hyperinflation, and then like the government can't hold itself together and it breaks all apart or something like that. I'm not sure.
Do you think the
This
United States
pandemic.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that in the Book of Revelation, the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Hmm.
I think that the pandemic is the first horse of the apocalypse.
The white
But
horse.
yeah, the white horse, because he has a crown and a bow. He has, and then corona means crown. And if you look at what the word in Greek they use for bow, it's not like a bow and arrow. It means fabric, and which is so weird to me. But I think that's the masks. Have you heard of the Strong's Concordance to the
Mm.
Bible, where you can go look at the Greek?
Uh-uh.
Anyway, I'll try to text you that.
Okay. Yeah.
Where? So anyway, I think the pandemic is the first worst, and then war is the next one, the red one. So, but yeah, even if it goes well, the direction where it's headed is like we're having some sort of communist revolution. Instead of class, there's a lot of racial tension building,
Hmm.
and then a lot of. I mean, do you feel that?
I do. Yeah,
I mean,
definitely. I mean, you know what I see on the news and everything like that, and I didn't know what critical race theory was, and it's really, really messed up. So now that I know, it's obvious the destruction that it can bring to the country.
I would watch some. I listened to something recently that was talking about just comparing that to the communist revolution in China, like the Red Terror,
Uh-huh.
and I think maybe the young generation will. Maybe they'll hunt us all down and kill us. I don't know.
And
But
and the thing is that the reason they want to do that is because they think that the grid will, no, well, not the grid, but the supply chain, that's the right word I've been thinking. The supply chain is always going to be there to supply them with everything that they need.
yeah, things like happen. What was that African country? Like, not Zimbabwe, or I don't know. Anyway, think sometimes it seems like these revolutions they go after people who are living independently on the land, and then once they kill like all the farmers, then there's a huge um,
Famine.
starvation.
Yeah.
Famine. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's
Oh
exact.
yeah,
And
like in
go ahead. Go ahead.
not like
Uh,
in the Ukraine, Holodomor, and yeah, probably in Venezuela. I don't know.
yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
and it was in South America, the country you're thinking of, because the government there, I think they were getting the white farmers out of the land and bringing in black farmers or something like that. But it turned out that the people who were getting this new land didn't really want to work it, or at least they didn't understand how to do it, because they were presented with what we've been talking about here today, where it's like, okay, we have this social problem where the white farmers are the devil or whatever, and then they get them out of the land, and then they bring other people in that never did farming before, and now they have this responsibility to get all this food out that's going to feed everybody. But for one, they don't want to do it, and two, they don't know how. And after that, they figure it out that that was happening. They found themselves in a position where there was no food coming out of the farms because the farmers were either killed or taken out. And
Yeah,
that's
I heard
exactly
about
what
that.
is going to happen. If these revolutionaries do get some type of advantage over farmers and everybody else, where they think that the supply chain is always going to be there, and then they're going to find out that it's not.
Also with communism, like I'm still paying for this property, but I own this property and my business is my own. And so I have a lot of pride in it, and I want it to be high quality produce and I want it to be good because it's like a reflection of myself, it's like my whole life is into this. But if someone were to come in here, like in a commune or something and they didn't own any of it, it really wasn't theirs. It's kind of hard, like I heard in Russia during the communists, they would have farms and they would have horses on the farms, but nobody owned a horse. You would just use whatever horse you wanted. And I think that stuff like that, like private ownership of things where, I mean, with a horse especially, you would develop, you'd have your favorite horse. And what if some jerk who liked to beat animals was using your favorite horse? That was one thing I was thinking of, like communism sucks
Yeah.
because you don't have that relationship, with something that you're really attached to. It's just like all, I don't know. What
Yeah.
is that, Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset? It's like you
Yes.
will own nothing.
And see,
But
the
I
the
think,
thing about that article is that it also said that if you want to be part of the system, you have to give everything up, and if you don't, then you're gonna be living in the outskirts of those cities where they're getting everything for free, and you're gonna be living in a shack, being poor and not having anything, or at least you're gonna be having some type of, I guess, post-apocalyptic world where even though the grid didn't go down or anything like that, the rest of society is going to push you out because you are not part of the out of the society that's getting everything for free.
and it seems like, I don't know if you know about the Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah,
You know about them?
yeah,
Yeah. So, it's like maintain humanity at 500 million or something like that. And it seems like the forces in charge have this goal of they want to reduce the human population drastically and then have everyone living in like smart cities.
Mhm.
And you're like hooked to the grid, with some sort of chip implant, that Klaus Schwab is talking about, melding your digital and biological self, to where the currency is digital. I don't know. It just seems like satanic slave system they're trying to develop. But
Yeah, and that's now we have the technology for that, because that's exactly what cryptocurrencies, in my opinion, do. People talk about that the cryptocurrencies are gonna be a type of, I guess, way that is going to make you more of a private citizen, but they forget that those technologies work on the blockchain, which track everything, and they can make it
yeah,
possible. And China did come out with its cryptocurrency, and the good thing about it is that it showed the dangers of it, because they are able to just turn off the money of whoever they feel like they're not doing what the government want them to do. So it shows the danger, and I hope people pay attention to it. But they're gonna think, well, that's happening over there, not here, so they're gonna adopt it. And especially we have some type of major event like an economic collapse to where the U.S. dollar is no longer, you know, something of value. They're gonna switch to cryptocurrency or something like that to try to salvage it, or at least introduce a new currency where it's gonna have a lot more control.
yeah, yep. And then it seems like they're doing that on purpose, just printing, 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 and they know that it will crash. But I think they want to, so they can bring in the new system. It's the Great Reset, and then with this digital currency, you'll have to. I think you'll have to behave yourself.
Yeah, and you have to do what they want you to do. And
Yeah,
especially if this is an anti-Christian system, then you already know who's being
yeah.
targeted.
Yep. Then you're in the Mark of the Beast territory.
Yep, and that's
Yeah.
where people are gonna have to make their final stance.
The Man-Made Survival Show.